Thank you guys so much for coming. We get that this is really valuable time for all of you. And also to thank you for letting us be part of your process. This is a very important part of your community, and we feel very privileged to be able to play with you to get to a full design for the park. I am going to, first off, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to walk through 3 alternatives for the park design. We're going to then do a group exercise where you compare and contrast. And I'm here to tell you, above all else, do not panic. We are about to go through just a blur of information. You don't have to remember all of it. You don't even have to, nor do we want you to pick a favorite scheme. What we want you to do is we want you to look at the schemes. They've been specifically designed to have some things in common and some things that are different. So it's kind of like if an architect comes to your house and he says, so you come in the front door. Do you want the bathroom near the front door? Do you want the living room near the front door? And you're like, oh yeah, let's go with the living room. That's the level that you're going to talk about this thing tonight. Don't worry about the number of benches. Don't worry about a specific tree where it lives. You'll see vegetation and benches on the plan, but what you're really looking at are what are the big pieces and giving us feedback on where they live and what they're next to. So this is the 2010 master plan. This is the foundation of all of our work. We recognize that there's a huge amount of work that went into it. It's a little bit tricky, I think, when a project lasts this long and comes up with a beautiful illustrative, because it feels like, okay, bust out the bulldozers, let's build this puppy. What this plan really did is it helped you get through that first phase of what could this park be and what are the big pieces that we want in it. What you'll see in the colored bubbles, these are your major, what we call program elements. These are the things you want in your park. It identified an open lawn space for gathering, an amphitheater, a playground, a water feature. So these are the big pieces, a restroom, that we start moving around the site, like the front door, the kitchen, the living room, and testing out the different relationships and where they live. So in all of these schemes, you will see each of these program elements, but in different ways. I do want to say just really quickly, the goal for us is to help guide you guys to a final scheme. It is not fully funded at this point. It is a big push for a community of this size to build this large of a vision. I think for us, one of the things we love about the project is the partnership that we're seeing between NCPRD and the city. They are working currently, they will continue working on a funding strategy. We're going to try and build you the best, most comprehensive picture for the park possible. And then as we move forward, we'll figure out what can be funded. In the end, what we will protect the most as a design team are these core elements. One thing moving forward, the 2010 master plan was put out. It was really well received, well loved. It put out these park elements, but it also raised a lot of questions. Questions like, what about the geese? So, questions like, could we get the restroom closer to the playground? Questions like, water feature, awesome, but could it be interactive? The big, large tree that's on the site. The master plan did not include that. Lots of public feedback is like, hey, let's keep the big tree. So these are the types of, this is the type of feedback that we're pulling in. We've also done a ton of technical investigation. You'll see it on the boards around the room. And then last but not least, a huge public input process in phase 1, which I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to walk you through.
Most of you probably participated, hopefully you participated with an online survey that we had in the summer. Did anybody take that online survey? And did anybody come to the August 24th kickoff event in the park? Perfect. That sounds just about right, because we had 775 people take the online survey. We had about 350 people at the park that day. It was a really sunny day after the smoke cleared, and it was a really great event. So thanks to everyone for coming out to that. And then we collected about 140 comment cards at that event. And then many of the SAC members and staff tabled at the farmer's market, movies in the park, concerts in the park. So there was a big push in August to get some information to the design team, and so that's what we did. We asked about those program elements, about the play area. We asked about the amphitheater, gathering space, children's, or the water feature, how people like to relax in the park. And there was some definitely top themes that came out. The children's play area should be focused on natural play area with imagination. The water feature, nature spray and natural looking, kind of rose to the top. So the design team has this information, and they're thinking about this as they develop their design alternatives. There's another survey online. It just went online today, and it's what you're doing here today, and we're trying to get some more public feedback. So hopefully we get another 700 people take that survey that we can get to them as they go to their next step. And now I'm going to pass it off to Jonathan to talk to you about the designs.
There's a lot of thought that went into these designs, and I'm not going to get into a lot of the background, but we did a lot of site analysis. We looked at the floodplains for the park site. We looked at the slopes, the utilities, all of that sort of baked in, but I'm not necessarily going to be focusing on that as much as I really want to talk through the spaces that we're creating, the differences between the parks. So scheme one we're calling flow, and it's really built off this idea of the flow of the river. And so the organization of the space is really these kind of flowing pathway lines that interconnect with each other to create spaces on the site. And this is the kind of larger site plan. And just to get you oriented, downtown Milwaukie is at the bottom of the screen here. The wastewater treatment plant in Kellogg Creek over here, and the Willamette here. So north is to the right of the screen in all of these schemes. And as Melinda talked about those what we call program elements, which are sort of the basic building blocks of the park that we sort of develop the schemes around. And I'll try to illustrate the differences between these, but in this scheme, the amphitheater, the place where you might have a movie in the park or a summer concert, lives in the larger part or the widest part of the park. And then you're going to see in all these schemes, we've really created this triad of the restroom building, the playground, and the water feature, because those pieces all kind of want to live together. If you're a parent that brings your young child to the park, you want easy access from the playground to the restroom. So you're going to see that group of three sort of move around the site on these different schemes, but they tend to stay together. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you can see some of these elements. And I want to start with the circulation. And one thing that's interesting about this site is there's kind of three main areas where you cross from downtown to get into the site. And of course, if you can find a parking place, there is a parking lot there as well. And what we've really identified is that this is Monroe Street here, and that's really the one place where you cross, where you kind of land in the park. Over here, you're sort of by the parking area. Over here, you're kind of at the end. And so we've really identified this as kind of as a pedestrian coming from downtown anyway, that this is sort of a major landing area. I think you're all also probably aware that we have the trolley trail, which is a large regional trail that runs through the site. So in all of these schemes, you're going to see the trolley trail and how we've handled that. And then the kind of the main circulation. So when you look at this diagram, things in pink are not wheelchair accessible, so meaning they're either too steep or they have a staircase. But the blue areas are places you can take a wheelchair and wander down. So these are the main circulation areas of the park, and you can see that kind of circuitous diagram of the pedestrian pathways. And we have quite a bit of slope on this site, as you know, so these tend to be kind of long to get from top to bottom. You have to kind of meander down to keep the slopes from being too steep. The other thing that we've been really interested in all these sites is views, both views from downtown into the park, but also identifying places on the park that are gathering areas where we really want to maintain views upriver and downriver. And so you're going to see that in these schemes, in these locations of trying to locate trees in a way that really preserve and frame those views. So the trolley trail, I'm going to kind of start at the top of the bank and sort of and kind of work down to some degree. In Scheme 1, the trolley trail really sort of hugs the edge of Highway 99. It does this little jig here where it goes around some utilities. And the vision for the trolley trail is to widen it out to maybe 12 or 16 feet wide and separate it between bicycles and pedestrians. So there's clearly marked pathways. So bicyclists who are really using it as a means of transportation can zip through in their lane, and people that want to stroll can be in their lane. And you're going to see at this Monroe Crossing that I talked about, where in a lot of these schemes we have a plaza space. What we want to do is really treat this intersection in a way that says to people that are on their bicycles that this is a pedestrian zone. There might be some kind of specialty paving that says this takes priority over the people that are moving through. It's really a park for the people that are in the park. In Scheme 1, this plaza space that you arrive at from Monroe is probably the biggest of the three schemes. And what it does is it has this kind of meandering character. So there's really this kind of secondary layer of pathway that's off of the trolley trail that has places for people to sit. You can look out at the river if you want to just come over from downtown and have your lunch. You can do that there. And it really goes from Monroe all the way down to even past Jefferson a little bit. And part of that plaza here is the water feature element, which we heard from the first public meeting is really wants to be kid-friendly, interactive, and kind of nature themed. And one of the distinctions between this scheme and the schemes that I'm going to show you later is that the water feature, we've tried to push it off of Highway 99 as far as we can, but it's at the same kind of level here. So it really has a strong civic presence. So the idea is that if you're downtown and you're looking down, you will actually see that water element. And it really becomes kind of a civic calling card to beckon you into the park and invite you in. And connected to that, but further down the slope, is the children's play area. And I think one of the distinctions between this play area and the ones you'll see later in the other schemes is it's much more of a meander. It has spaces that are sort of higher up on the slope, closer to the water feature, areas that are further down on the slope. And it really is this idea of adventure play, that it's a nature-based playground. It might have an embankment slide in it, but it might also have logs that kids can manipulate and build things with. And so if you were to sort of slice a section through the park, through that area that I just talked about, here's Highway 99. This is the trolley trail coming through here with this plaza and the water feature. So we've really tried to pull this into the park, but you can see that this is all kind of on the same grade. And then the playground sort of starts up here and kind of works its way down the slope. So it really sort of engages the slope. And then part of that, that triad that I mentioned is the restroom. We haven't really started designing the restroom for the project, but the idea is that it's really a strong architectural statement. It's a beautiful structure that's in the park. It's something that is warm and inviting in the park. In this location, it's really serving the water feature and the playground well. And the idea is that it could also have like a changing place. So if kids come there or parents come with kids, they can change out of clothes. And then it's also quite close to the trolley trail, so in some ways it can function to serve that as well. The north portion of the park is really more passive. So we see the integration of native plants, passive walkways, benches, maybe places for people to picnic. And you may have seen some of the site history boards in the room. And also, you know, one of the things that we want to do with this park is integrate the history of the site, kind of a narrative about what this place is, what the community is all about, and also the integration of art into the site. And so we have some different strategies about how we might approach that. We don't have an artist as part of the team yet, but that's something that we hope to integrate in at a future date. And this was just an idea of saying, you know, we know this site floods. We know this is a park that's really about the river. So why not celebrate that aspect of it and maybe develop an element that starts to mark the various floodplains or the flood events that have happened over the year. So it's that kind of thinking about, like, what is the nature of this park and how do we bring out those hidden elements to the site so that people can see them even though they may have happened in the past. One unique element to this first scheme is this picnic area, which we see as kind of connected to this plaza that I showed you. The idea is that it could perhaps have a cover to it if budget allows, but it might be kind of a group picnicking area where you could have a birthday party with kids or some other kind of event. And it's in a really nice position here. It looks over the amphitheater space, and you get these kind of commanding views over the river from that location. Of the three schemes, the amphitheater is probably the simplest in this one. The idea is that it's just an open lawn area, and that there would be space here that you could set up a temporary stage if you want to do a movie in the park or a concert. There could be a location here for the winter solstice fire. So currently it's sitting over here, and there might be a way as part of this development of the park to get it in a location where more people can gather around it and becomes a little bit bigger civic gesture. And then this edge area, there's a pathway that connects from the ADA parking space over here that could terminate in an overlook. So if you want to get closer to the river, but you can't manage to navigate down the slope, you have that way to really engage the river in a more direct way. And then we're looking at this edge. I think one of the concerns that people have is how do you mitigate geese on the site? And although we may not solve that problem 100%, there are some strategies that we can employ to minimize that. So we're looking at vegetated areas where geese are nervous about being around potential predators, maybe a goose fence or something that prevents the geese coming up with their young goslings. And then a place for when there are light watercraft events, a place where they can be staged kind of on that edge. As you're probably aware that there's a new staircase and some bank repair that's happening here right now that I believe will be done, I think, at the end of the month. And so this is going to be a great new feature in the park in all of these schemes. And so if we were to cut, again, a section through this part of the park, you can see, again, Highway 99 and the trolley trail. This is that covered picnicking pavilion, and then the slope, and then this kind of gently sloping amphitheater lawn space that's in here. And then again, this kind of goose barrier and the existing walkway and the river. So alternative 2, I'm just going to hop right into alternative 2. We're calling it FLUVIAL, and it was kind of inspired by this idea of the way a river flows and deposits sediment and creates these kind of these sort of organic forms and the movement of the water, and really creating these little terraces where these program elements live and then circulation moves in between them. So again, this is sort of the view of this scheme in the context of downtown Milwaukee. And similar, this is probably the most similar to the first scheme in the sense that the lawn and amphitheater is happening at the widest part of the park here. And then again, that triad of the restroom, the play area, and the water feature. So we'll zoom in a little closer into the park and look at circulation. So the trolley trail is here, and then you can see this kind of network of circulation. So there's some real differences between these, and I would invite you to kind of look at that a little more closely and comment on it, because I think we're really interested in how people move across the site and how directly they can get from location to location. And again, views are going to be important in all of these schemes, and we've identified some places in this scheme. This plaza, again, at Monroe, has these commanding views up and down the river. Another little picnicking overlook area here that also will have really great views toward Elk Rock Island. The trolley trail, again, a very similar design as what I described in the first scheme, the kind of separated pedestrian and bicycle lanes. This has a little bit more of a meander to it, so it's going around this utility up here and then kind of coming into the site over on this side. And then similar to the first scheme is this, at the Monroe Crossing, is creating this plaza. And one of the differences between this and the first scheme is that this plaza sits at the same grade as the roadway, but the water feature then drops down in grade. So it's really off the road and kind of nestled below this. So again, if you're coming from downtown, you could come here, there would be benches and places to sit and view out to the river, and then you can kind of come down these stairs or down this ramp here to get down to this lower portion of the site. So the water feature is next to the playground here and has some seating on this edge too for looking out toward the river. And then again, with the playground is close to the water feature. It does have some embankment here, so we're trying to utilize the slope in all of these schemes because there's, I think, opportunities for fun things for kids on slopes. But this playground is a little more compact. The first scheme I showed you, it's a little more meandering, so there's a little bit more maybe exploration. This sort of consolidates the play area in kind of one area. So to give you a sense of that grade change, so again, Highway 99, this upper plaza with the seating area, and then the water feature is happening in this location, and the playground is kind of happening behind here on this slope back behind. So a real difference between those two schemes. This scheme has kind of a unique sort of terrace element. This is the restroom here, but we have a lot of grade change here where you could just kind of come and hang out on these steps and look out to the river. Again, some ideas about what this architectural element could be of the restroom. And then one of the things that we heard in the first public meeting about art is maybe trying, instead of doing some kind of abstract sculptural element, is maybe try to integrate the art into built elements of the park. So this is just kind of an idea more than a specific proposal, but there could be these different locations in the park where you start to build artistic elements into structures or into seating elements, and really try to integrate it into things that you're already building and try to leverage the artist's inspiration into some of those pieces. The amphitheater in this scheme is probably the most developed in the sense that it would have a permanent stage that might be 12 or 18 inches above the grade down here, and that there could be these seating steps. You can kind of get a sense of it here to create level areas in the lawn. So if you have an event and you want to set up tents, there might be some flat areas to do that. but it has the flip side of that is it's not an open, flexible space like in the first scheme. So maybe having a little impromptu small soccer game in here, as somebody mentioned earlier today, might be a little more challenging or maybe more interesting. And then recognizing that there are these light watercraft events that happen in the park. Here, they're really coming into this lawn space. So maybe a little more separated from the watercraft launch area. And then you can see what this looks like in sections. So this terrace, you can see there might be a covered stage here, and then these terraces coming up the slope and then up to the top of the bank. And the last scheme we're calling VISTA, and it's really organized around these straighter lines. And the idea is to develop pathways that can take you more directly from the top of the bank down to the river edge, and then organize these program spaces around those. And again, this is kind of the big picture context of downtown. And here things are organized quite differently than from the first two schemes. We've taken the amphitheater and we've kind of pushed it into the narrow part of the site, which does some kind of interesting things. And then there's still this plaza space that's on Monroe, but the play area and the water feature and the restroom are much closer to the parking area, although up the hill. We've tried to site these elements above the 100-year floodplain in all instances, so that's why they're always up on the top of the bank, if you're wondering why that is. Again, zooming in a little closer. And so you can see one thing that this organization does is when you cross at Monroe, or even cross over here, you get some more direct connections down to the river this way. And again, views are really important. So the views downstream and upstream, and then some other opportunities that I'll talk about in a minute. Again, the trolley trail, and I just want to kind of reinforce this idea that when the trolley trail crosses these plaza spaces, we really want to make the plaza the priority space and really reinforce that in the way we do the paving design for those spaces. So the plaza here, it's interesting because we're at the narrow part of the site and we're really dropping a similar amount of grade as you are on the wide part of the site. Things get a little steeper over on the side, which has some actual interesting opportunities. So this plaza space here comes, there's actually some seating steps that could form the top of the amphitheater space. And the amphitheater ends up being a little steeper, but maybe a little more intimate because you're a little closer to the stage. And we sort of view the stage area as maybe it doesn't have a cover, but it still has a permanent stage place where you can have events. You don't have to set up a stage when you have a concert. There can be electrical and those sort of things associated with it. And you can kind of see what's happening here with when you come from Highway 99 to this plaza and this overlook. This is the amphitheater. It becomes a little more dramatic to the stage down here. This has also a kind of a picnic terrace element that could have like a high bar, so you could sort of sit and watch a concert and be on your laptop or whatever you want to do, or picnic tables. So kind of a unique little terrace space there. And then one of the ideas that we had with this scheme, since it is so linear, I think many of you probably know that the old trolley line used to cross the creek here. In fact, if you go out to Klein Point, there's some interpretive plaques there that describe that, and you can see the footings from the old trestle. But the idea is to almost recreate that old line coming through the park, and as sort of a window into the past of what the site used to be. And maybe it's recreated as quite literally with tracks, or maybe it's more like in sort of an interpretive element with text or graphics. But that could become a really strong art statement through the park that would also be a window into the history of the site and the city. And then that that would terminate into the interactive water feature, which is here in this scheme. It's kind of set off of the trolley trail, separated by planting. And the water feature could start to take on some of the characteristics of that interpretive line that comes through. And these are just some images of what that might look like. And then it's a little hard to describe what's happening with the playground here, but it actually exists on a couple of levels. So there's kind of a lower level that you can get to quite easily from the parking lot here. But then you can also zigzag up the slope and actually cross over the playground with a little footbridge. So it's sort of a two-dimensional puzzle. And then the restroom here is really probably, it's serving the playground and the water feature. It's also most directly connected with the trolley trail here, which might have some advantages. And then another unique thing about the third scheme is what happens at the wide part of the park. So these pathways that are cutting through terminate in these overlooks. So one sort of with a view upstream, and another with a view downstream. And it's really bisecting what we're describing as kind of a natural area. So it could be kind of a lower area of the park, might have native trees and vegetation. It could have an elevated boardwalk that cuts across it. So these are some images of what that could look like. And then sort of carved out of that on the edge, again, is this place for light watercraft to happen. So if we cut that section through there, again, Highway 99, the water feature is up here. And then the playground is sort of happening. You can see this person sort of appears to be standing in the air, but really they're walking across that elevated walkway. So there's this kind of two-tiered playground. And then this sort of natural area that would exist over here. I think just to summarize this really quickly, these schemes have different organizational elements which are going to lend to the character of the site. So whether it's these sort of straighter lines that are more direct, or schemes that are a little bit more flowing, I want you to think about that a little bit. I want you to think about where the water feature and the plaza and the playground are in these schemes, whether they're up as a more civic gesture relating to downtown, or more tucked into the park away from the roadway, or maybe in a more discrete area on this scheme. I want you to think about the character of the amphitheater. Is it the kind of shorter, steeper? Is it just a big open lawn space that you can do lots of different things in? Is it the kind of gentle terrace? And then any other ideas that you guys have as you're thinking about this. I've heard a lot of wonderful ideas just talking to people at the boards that are like, oh, aha, yeah, that's a great thought. We develop these very specifically to have real differences. And the idea after today, and once we get all the feedback from the online surveys and we understand what you, the community, is really thinking about, we're going to develop a scheme that integrates those ideas. So I think we really want to stress that it's not a function of picking one of these schemes to move forward with. We're really interested in you saying, I really like this thing about this scheme, but I really like that element in that scheme, and the water feature over there is a really great idea. And we'll take those and we'll come back with a scheme with a new name and new character, and we'll illustrate it a little. We'll get some views and some 3D modeling and stuff so you can really get a sense of what it's going to be like. Try to dissect them as much as you can for us. I think that'd be really helpful.